How are we doing, Kansas Jayhawks fans? This is your host, Nick Rondeau, bringing at you some Jayhawks Daily content, and we've got a little bit of a lull in this week. We're waiting for this weekend for the big matchup against NC State Wolfpack and Will Wade's team, and we're coming off, obviously, that huge victory over Mizzou, but still in that non-conference segment, still waiting for the new season to start, but we've had some, big news for the fact that Darren Peterson has returned, and this team is really, needs to start taking a shape. And there were a lot of question marks going into, obviously, the Darren Peterson saga, we'll call it for that, even though it was only about a month. He was announced, with the early injury in early November. So it didn't last too long, but we'll get to that. We're going to speak a little bit about this team's success and at the free throw line, especially even in just the Bill Self era, and kind of what that bench is shaping up like. Who's going to be that first one off, and if Bill will ever let some people out of the doghouse, who knows? But we're going to start off. Yes, it's the number two scorer kind of conundrum, I would say, and a lot of this stems from how we think this team performed without Darren Peterson, and there was no doubt about it when he came back. He's the number one scorer. There's a reason he's averaging 20. There's a reason he's our top scorer. It's because he's that talented. He is an incredible player. Just that simple. When Darren Peterson is healthy, you're not letting anyone else get more shots. Just wouldn't make sense. He's too incredibly gifted of a basketball player, and I don't mean that in a way of he works for it. Bill says there's nobody that works harder than Darren Peterson than he works. Takes as many shots as he does just to practice. So earned it. But that number two position, who's going to provide an additional spark, an additional threat to the team? And we kind of saw, it passed around. The mantle was passed around each game without Darren Peterson. We saw early on, Flory really flourish. Flourish, I like it. But, he did an excellent job commanding the paint, commanding the ball also, and just dominating his quick post-hook moves, finished with both hands, finishing any lob that was thrown up to him, getting some, additional rebounds. He was doing everything for us. He was the top scorer for, a couple of those games easily. And, it showed, and it was like, wow, this guy could be a real threat. Imagine your best player as a point guard and your second best player as the center, and they can both work the two-man game. Like, that's incredible. But then you saw it die down a little bit, and you even see in the first game back, Flory wasn't very commanding. Only 4 of 9 from, the field. Didn't really ask for the ball as much as we had seen in the past, and definitely didn't look as comfortable. I give Flory a lot of credit. I'm never going to take credit away from him. He makes some excellent passes, actually. It's been very fun to see his progression into getting the ball in the paint, getting collapsed on, and realizing there is someone open. He makes that skip pass, and it's not half bad. It hasn't been flying out of bounds. A couple of those happened with Hunter Dickinson last year. It's getting to the player. It's not getting in a real shooting position. Going to hit it, but it's swapping the field to the point where then it's a swing man. It's a different switch. There's help defense going on. So I like what Flores doing there, but the offensive side of it, we want to see him be a little bit more aggressive. But is he going to be the number two scorer down the stretch? Will he be our guy to really work? I think that two-man game at its best is one of the best in the country. It reminds me, the talent of, Braden Smith and, Trey Kaufman. They're just fantastic players, but, you got to look at other options. And I don't want to say Melvin Council. I think he's an excellent player. I think he does a whole lot for this team. I think this last game he actually kind of showed it, what he can put up offensively, when that works, what opens up in the passing lanes. And, he gets the free throw line. His 3-point percentage is only going up, I guess you could say, just consider how low it started. And, he runs the offense at a very, very high pace, and we love to see that. But number two scorer, I like him for other options on this team. So, a Trey White, look at the great game he had. Not even didn't take more than 9 shots, I believe, and put up 20 points. Just an excellent performance from him, and we want to see more of that. His 3-point shooting has been excellent this year. He's shooting about 45% from three, averaging 14 points a game. Just excellent looks. 53 from the field, 85 from the free throw line. I mean, he's, again, I would love for him to be in that 50, 40, 90 club. It would just be incredible. Obviously the free throws got to keep falling for him. He's got to stay aggressive. But Trey White has been just a ray of sunshine in this Darren Peterson game, minus that UConn game. Just disappointing how it didn't really, wasn't his best performance, but I love the way that he's playing. Just really smart basketball, complementary basketball, get the defender up off their feet, then take it to the rack. Does some excellent work. I think his passing could get a little bit better, but his creativity is off the charts right now, and I'm just excited about it. And, the last guy I got to mention in this type of role is, our only other starter, with this five is Bryson Tiller, because he just came onto the scene so hot. That UNC game is going to be in everyone's brains. I bet, especially come tournament time, when teams are going to be looking at them and they're going to be like, oh, that guy's a flamethrower. Yeah, he I remember when he hit 4 straight threes against UNC in the second game of the season. It's true. He did. He came onto the scene so incredibly, hot. It just, we hoped that we would continue to see it. But the three-point percentage has dropped under 30%. He's shooting under 50% from the field as a big man. Those are not exactly the numbers that, we were kind of hoping for to continue. So will he be our number 2 scorer? No, and I don't expect that. I don't think any of us should. He needs to be a great complementary scorer. The number 3, the number 4, but can be that number 3 whenever you need him. Can be that number 2 even whenever you need him, because he just has it all. Fran Fraschilla said it best during the game. He was like, the best part about Bryson Tiller is the fact that, he works too much of his game from outside to in. He needs to work his game from inside to out, and meaning his paint moves, his work and offensive, prowess around the paint is excellent. But lately he's been, starting from the three-point line and moving in. Work out. Start that paint presence. Establish yourself as, a great scorer, and then work back to the three-point line. Once you've established, wow, I can drive and score at will, they're going to have to, leave you open a little bit more because they don't want to get dribble drive-by. So I just love the opportunities that, he's going to be presented as a great mismatch. He's just a fun player, so I'm excited for him down the stretch. But we're continuing on, and we got to speak just a little bit about Darren Peterson. We got all week to talk about DP saga, but people were so critical. People were tinfoil capping, me being one of them. What does Bill mean by this? Why are we not seeing him? We know he's going to be a top pick. Why is he not playing? And Bill said it, great. He was like, if he fractured his leg, no one would be saying anything. It's an injury. An injury is an injury. Yes, you're hurt. You don't want to push to play. And guess what? If that hamstring was torn because he pushed to play coming back to UConn, there goes our season. And I think we'd be a whole lot more upset. Yeah, we can't blame him because, we would see the injury, but it's not all about that. Sometimes it's about letting the guy get back to 100%. He has not played a full basketball game in a little while. He's actually, you can commonly say, he's not played a full basketball game in a Kansas uniform. He's had cramping issues. The injury obviously started. He just has not played that full game for us, which it's fine. He's averaging 20 points in 24 minutes, but let the guy get back to 100%. He had a little bit of a sickness. Everyone does, leaving the cold. I did too, DP. Stuff like that happens. But, we just got to let him fully get back. We got to show him the Allen Fieldhouse love, especially when we come back after the NC State game. I just think, he's going to thrive as a KU player if the fan base stays behind him. There's no need to turn at any point. We had our first speed bump in the road, a little bit of adversity. That's done. No more. Until Darren Peterson says, I'm no longer playing for the Kansas Jayhawks. And even then, if that is after the season and he's off to the NBA, you got to root for your guy. But beyond that, you can't be petty. You can't be. We've got to support our guy in the best way we can. So, DP, we're all behind you. I think we were just more confused by some of Bill's comments surrounding it. They just sounded odd. But, yeah, he's getting 4 treatments a day lasting 45 minutes each, rehabbing to get back. These are all things that we appreciate, that we don't see, but say those things, Bill. Then we'll know, like, okay, yeah, he's working on his way to get back to 100%, to be a contributor on this team. That's all we got to love. So DP will be back, continuing in the fold, doing his best to, establish himself as our top player, but also just to establish a healthy version of himself playing at a high level for us. So we're excited for that. And next up, we want to talk a little bit about how this team's getting to the charity stripe. I love it. I appreciate it. And, yes, I've looked at the numbers, and we're only 70th in free throws per game, free throw percentage, that is. We're a little bit lower in free throws made per game. But it's not even about that. It's just kind of when you look at Kansas basketball, yeah, you assume we're getting to the stripe, and you assume we're knocking them down. But it's not been, kind of a trademark. And it's not a great trademark to have, but I appreciate it because they're attacking. They're aggressive. They're playing the kind of ball that we would hope. They're not just settling for bad three-pointers. We've done enough of that over the years. We've settled for really bad threes, really bad shots. Get to the charity stripe, knock them down. It's disappointing when you see Jamari McDowell go 1 for 3 from the three-point line. But he gets fouled on a three-point shot that I think, like, things like that just go unnoticed. He could have had the first shot. No. Pump fake. Take a dribble in, step back, pump fake again, and then just get fouled. Like, as much as I would appreciate him making a three, I'm not saying it'd be worse. Getting to the charity stripe, they're called free throws for a reason. Even if you don't make them, uncontested, everyone gets a break, calm down, and you get a really good chance to put some points on the board when points come at a premium, especially for this team sometimes. 5 field goals against UConn in the second half. You got to appreciate what this team can do, from the free throw line then. So this is the most free throw attempts they've attempted per game since the Frank Mason era back in 2014, 2015, Devontae Graham. This is the most makes they've had since then. That's over 10 years. So you just got to appreciate them not just settling for shots that we're not typically great at. That's not our trademark. And Trey White is the embodiment of this. I love the way he's, playing right now. He's just being aggressive. He's being smart. He's being technical. Everything that we need Trey White to be down the stretch, he's doing. So, Darren, keep doing what you're doing because be as aggressive as you can. You will be good at the free throw line. Flory's numbers over 70% from the free throw line. You got to appreciate that for a big man. It's definitely excellent to watch. Trey White obviously soaring above. Melvin is always aggressive, and then Bryson, he can pick that number up a little bit, but he's got to pick up a couple of his numbers. We can't just coast off of 1 or 2 performances, Bryson. We need you day in, day out, every week for KU basketball. But finally, just want to talk a little bit about how that bench is shaping up and, who will be the sixth man, but kind of, I don't want to say more importantly, but in a sense, we've seen many years where Bill has played 6, 7, sometimes maximum 8 guys. So our 6, 7, and 8 right now would be Elmarko, Jamari, and Cole. Those are clearly our first 3 guys off the bench. Obviously Cole started in the starting lineup and was not quickly displaced, but within 3-4 games displaced from the lineup. And even, by the 4th game when he wasn't displaced from the starting lineup, he was just discarded afterwards, getting pulled early and then only playing about 15 minutes, which was fine. But now he's getting about 1 to 3 minutes, and it's just confusing. So will Cole Rosario be our 6th man? I don't see it. He's got to get out of the doghouse. I don't know what he did. Maybe he just doesn't like, maybe he was kind of saying what I was seeing. Cole, take a couple dribbles. Attack the rim. You don't just need to be 3-pointers and attacking the offensive glass for a rebound. See what else you can contribute. So maybe Bill said a little bit of something like that, but he's got the talent. He's got the talent to be a 6th man, a great one at that. But will we see that immediately? I don't know about that. Jamari McDowell and Elmarko are really fighting for this spot. First guy off the bench now that Darren's back. And I think people might know just from how I speak, but I'm an Elmarko guy. I'm a big Elmarko guy. I think how he plays is, exactly what we need to come off the bench. He's just a very, very talented player, aggressive offensively. Defensively, you're getting an absolute dog. And, you just have to appreciate that for what it is. But Jamari McDowell, he's got a little bit more of that consistent 3-point shot. He's just a little bit more consistent. He's shooting 40%. Elmarco's shooting 37%. But if we're really looking at it, I think even myself could admit that Jamari is just a bit more consistent from the 3-point line. So we'll see how they kind of play. They both give great defensive presence. They both give great offensive sparks and jolts off the bench, and can easily handle the point, maybe not easily, but can handle the point in the absence of a couple of those other guards that we have starting. But who's going to be down the stretch? I don't care, as long as it's both of them. As long as we do not shrink this bench down to the smallest imaginable amount. I'd like to, Paul and Bia is getting, a minute or two in every game. I don't mind it. He just gets a couple of rebounds. He's not doing anything incredibly wrong. Keep playing him. I like having a deeper bench. Jaden, you know how I didn't even mention Jaden Dawson? It's because I genuinely don't know what his role is on this team anymore. He's been in the doghouse since day one. I would say somewhat deservedly so, because yes, his 3-point shooting was abysmal at the start of the year. He's still shooting only 28%, but a couple of the games you're watching him, and you're like, well, he's actually helping the offense. He's running the offense. He's looking for that backdoor lob. He's looking for better shots and better plays. But Bill's got him, buried away on the bench. Even putting Evers in over him, in a game. Just getting really just sick of him. So we'll see what is definitely there down the stretch. There's no way he's going to be buried deep the whole way. We've got an entire conference schedule to play. We've got a couple more non-conference games, and we've got just a lot of big ones. The season has started, but has it really? Has it really? If the conference games haven't started, that's when the physicality begins. That's when the real tests happen. Yeah, we've dealt with some adversity to kind of establish what this team's identity can be. Now it's time to see it. It's time to see it. So I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys are thinking about this team, about Darren's return, who's going to be our scorer. If you appreciate them getting to the charity stripe, please, just anything. I'm all ears. And I just want to thank you again so much for tuning in. But rock chalk. Go Jayhawks.